The sun hung merciless over the New Mexico desert, December 1888, scorching the cracked earth of Redemption, a ghost town abandoned after the gold rush faded. Dust swirled in lazy spirals, carried by a wind that wailed through skeletal mesquite trees, as if mourning the dreams buried beneath the sand. Josiah, a rancher worn down by 40 winters, rode his dun mare, Sage, across the barren flats, her hooves thudding a slow, steady rhythm against the parched ground. He'd been trailing a stray calf for 6 hours, the tracks faint in the brittle dirt, erased by the relentless wind. Silence was his companion out here, sacred, broken only by the creak of his leather saddle, the whine of the wind, and the distant screech of a red-tailed hawk circling above. Josiah liked it this way, alone, quiet, predictable. His graying beard framed a face carved by loss, eyes dulled to a stormy gray, like clouds heavy with rain that never fell. 4 years ago, smallpox stole his daughter, Leela, leaving him with nothing but a cradle that still rocked in his dreams and a guilt that gnawed like a coyote on bone. If you're hooked on cowboy love stories like this one, drop a 1 in the comments and ride along with Wild West love mysteries. But then he heard Ida sound so faint it could have been the wind, a breath that seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. Josiah froze in his saddle, head tilting, heart slowing to match Sage's plodding steps. It came again, a whimper, weak and sharp, like a thread about to snap. His calloused hand tightened on the reins, and he dismounted, tying Sage to a gnarled juniper. Rifle slung over his shoulder, he moved through the scrub, boots crunching on brittle earth, until he reached a clearing ringed by ancient cottonwoods. There, beneath the oldest tree, its branches twisted like a preacher's pleading hands, he saw her. Serafina, a Cherokee girl no older than 18, hung by her wrists from a rotting wooden door propped against the tree. Her arms stretched above her, bound with coarse mesquite fiber rope that bit into her skin, leaving raw red burns. Her body sagged like a broken doll, feet barely grazing the dirt. Her sun-darkened skin was dusted with grime, her long black hair matted with sweat and dried blood. Shallow, erratic breaths lifted her chest, each one a battle. Smallpox scars dotted her face, and a crude red dot painted on her forehead screamed accusation. Below her, a splintered plank bore words scratched in charcoal. Smallpox witch, keep away, God's curse. And in larger, jagged letters, white man's cleansing. Josiah's breath caught, bile rising in his throat. The air thickened, heavy with hate, like a curse whispered by the wind through dead leaves. His eyes, shadowed beneath his battered hat, traced the scenerages, rocks, no tracks, no horses. Whoever did this was long gone. His hand drifted to the knife on his belt. Christ, he muttered, voice rough as gravel. What the hell did they do to you? Serafina stirred, her head lolling forward, revealing a face young but hardened, high cheekbones hollowed by thirst, a strong jaw clenched in pain. Dried blood crusted her cracked lips. Her eyes fluttered, dark and unfocused, like a deer caught in a snare. You hear me, girl? Josiah asked, his voice hoarse, breaking the silence. No response. He stepped closer, boots crunching, heart thudding like a war drum. I ain't here to hurt you, he said softer, almost to himself. The sign's words burned in his mind, white man's cleansing. They echoed things he'd never said, never done, yet they made him feel guilty, complicit. He hesitated, fingers trembling on the knife's handle. Memories of Lila flooded back her fevered cries, her small hand going limp in his. He'd been powerless then, waiting for help that never came. This girl, this stranger, was a mirror to that pain. But her groan, faint and desperate, undid him. Damn all of them, he whispered, blade slicing through the rope with one firm stroke. I ain't that. No. Serafina collapsed forward, and Josiah caught her, her body fever-hot and light as a husk in his arms. He eased her to the ground, kneeling in the dust, his rough hands steadying her. Her eyes opened briefly, dark and frightened, searching his face like prey sizing up a predator. He poured water from his canteen onto a faded bandana and dabbed her lips. Easy now, he said, voice low. You're safe. Her chest heaved, each breath a fight, but she didn't speak, only stared, her gaze sharp despite the fever. Josiah's heart clenched at a strange ache, pity mixed with something deeper, like a stone cracking under years of weight. In that moment, Serafina's mind churned with fragments of the trail of tea, 2,200 rupees miles of frostbitten feet, rain-soaked misery, and smallpox-ridden blankets handed out by men like Sheriff Thorne, who'd traded Cherokee land for gold. Her family mother, father, 2 brothers fell one by one, their bodies left unburied in the Georgia mud. She'd survived, only to be abandoned when the pox marked her skin, the red dot on her forehead, the ropes, the sign they were Thorne's work, his way of erasing her as God's curse. Hatred burned in her, fierce and raw, a fire that kept her alive. Yet this man, this stranger with haunted eyes, cut her down. His hands, rough but gentle, trembled as he worked. His voice, gruff yet kind, carried no malice. She wanted to hate him another white man, but his gaze held a grief she recognized, a mirror to her own. "You got a name?" Josiah asked, wiping dust from her cheek. Silence. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She leaned into him, too weak to stand, her weight a quiet surrender. Josiah's jaw tightened, not from anger but from a resolve he hadn't felt in years. "Don't matter," he said, lifting her onto Sage's saddle. "You're coming with me." He draped his coat over her, its wool heavy with the scent of leather and sweat, and led the mare toward his ranch, 5 miles west, where a sagging cabin waited by a dry creek bed. The wind howled behind them, but for the first time in years, Josiah didn't feel alone. Serafina, though silent, felt a flicker of something new, not trust, not yet, but a crack in her hatred, like dawn breaking through a storm. He glanced back at her, her head slumped against Sage's neck, and saw Lila in her place, the same dark hair, same fragility. Guilt clawed at him, but so did purpose. "I couldn't save her," he whispered, more to the wind than to Serafina, "but I'll be damned if I let you go." Her eyes, half open, met his for a moment, and in that silence, something shifted, a fragile thread of understanding, tying their broken pasts together. The cabin squatted by a dry creek bed, its sagging boards weathered by the relentless New Mexico sun, 5 miles west of Redemption's crumbling ghost town, where the wind carried the sharp tang of sagebrush and the ghosts of broken dream. Josiah guided Sage through the creaking gate. Serafina slumped against the mare's neck, her fevered body swathed in his heavy wool coat, her dark hair spilling like spilled ink across the saddle. The sun had sunk, painting the sky a bruised purple, and the December 1888 air bit at Josiah's knuckles as he lifted her down, her frame light as a whispered prayer, her smallpox-scarred skin slick with sweat under the dim glow of a lantern. Inside, the cabin was a testament to his solitude. Lila's cradle in the corner, its wood polished by his restless fingers, a lone chair by the hearth, a blackened tin coffee pot perched on a shelf. The floorboards groaned under his boots, each step echoing the silence that had cloaked him since Lila's fevered cries faded 4 winters ago. His eyes, gray as a storm's edge, flickered with a strange achepity, guilt, and something softer, like a seed stirring in barren soil. Josiah eased Serafina onto a patched wool cot by the fireplace, stoking the embers until flames cast shadows that danced like restless spirits across her face. Her breaths came in shallow, ragged gasps, each one a fragile thread tethering her to life. He knelt, his calloused hands trembling as he mixed a poultice of wild yarrow and sage, learned from a Cherokee trader in Santa Fe's dusty market years back. "Stay with me, girl," he murmured, voice rough as sandstone, spreading the cool paste over her wrists, where coarse ropes had carved raw red burns. Her eyes fluttered, dark and sharp despite the fever, watching him like a hawk tracks a shadow. "I've got smallpox," she rasped, her voice faint but cutting, her English halting with the cadence of her people. "Ain't you scared?" Her gaze, piercing through the haze of pain, held both defiance and fear, like a deer poised to bolt. Josiah paused, his hand stilling on the cloth, water dripping onto the floor like tears. "It's all right," he said, voice steady as the desert's heartbeat. I'll be careful." His eyes met hers, unflinching, and in that moment he saw not just a survivor but a girl who'd clawed her way through hell. Her silence was heavy, laden with the weight of the Trail of Tears too, 200 miles of frost-bitten feet, starvation, and smallpox blankets handed out by men like Sheriff Thorne, who'd traded Cherokee lives for gold. Hatred burned in her, a fire stoked by betrayal. Yet this man's gentle hands, rough with calluses, moved with a care that contradicted his weathered frame, his broad shoulders hunched as if bearing an invisible load. "You don't gotta talk," Josiah said, dipping a cloth in a chipped basin, his voice low, like the wind whispering through mesquite. "Just rest." He dabbed her forehead, avoiding the red dot that screamed accusation, white man's cleansing. It stirred memories of Lila, her small body burning under his helpless hands, the preacher's hollow prayers. He pushed the thought down, focusing on Serafina's fevered skin, her high cheekbones sharp against sunken cheeks, her lips cracked like the creek bed outside. She flinched at his touch, her body tensing like a coiled spring, but she didn't pull away. Her gaze softened, like ice cracking on a spring-thawed stream, a flicker of trust breaking through her guarded heart. Days melted into nights, the cabin a cocoon of quiet routine. Josiah rose at dawn, splitting mesquite logs with an axe, each swing matching his steady pulse. Serafina, her fever breaking after 3 days, moved slowly, her steps unsteady, her smallpox scars fading to faint shadows. She swept the floor with a worn broom, her hands precise despite their tremble, and fed the chickens, her movements graceful, like a deer gliding through brush. Josiah watched from the porch, his pipe unlit, the tobacco's earthy scent mingling with the morning chill. "You're stronger than you look," he said one morning, leaning against the rail, his southwest drawl warm, like a campfire's glow. Serafina paused, gripping the broom, her dark eyes narrowing. "Strength don't mean much when they take everything," she said, her voice low, each word a stone dropped into still water. Josiah's jaw tightened, not from anger, but from the weight of her truth. He set the pipe down, fingers brushing Lila's locket beneath his shirt. "Lost my girl to the pox," he said, words spilling out, raw and jagged, like a wound torn open. 4 years back, couldn't do a damn thing. Watched her burn, and all I had was prayers that didn't mean nothing." His voice cracked, eyes fixed on the dry creek bed, its cracked earth a mirror to his grief. Serafina's broom stilled, her shoulders stiffening, but her gaze softened, like dawn piercing a storm. She stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the porch, and placed a hand on the rail, inches from his. "My family," she said, her English halting but fierce, "died on the trail. Thorne gave us blankets. Said they'd keep us warm. They brought death." Her voice trembled, not with fear but with a hatred so deep it seemed to carve her from within. Josiah's breath caught, his heart pounding like a war drum. He'd heard whispers in Redemption's saloon, Thorne's schemes, trading Cherokee land for gold, his lies cloaked in a lawman's badge. "That bastard," he muttered, fists clenching, knuckles white as bone. "He's got blood on his hands." Serafina's eyes met his, and for the first time they held recognition, a shared pain, like two rivers merging after a long, lonely course. "He called me a witch," she said, voice barely a whisper. "Left me to die so no one would know." Her fingers traced the scars on her wrist, a map of suffering, and Josiah saw Lila in her defiant, fragile, yet unbroken. "I ain't him," Josiah said, eyes locking with hers, "and you ain't alone no more." Serafina didn't reply, but her hand lingered on the rail, close enough to feel his warmth. She turned, sweeping again, her movements softer, less guarded, like a bird testing its wings after a storm. That night, she sat by the fire, her silhouette sharp against the flames, mending a tear in Josiah's coat, her stitches precise, a quiet offering. Josiah watched, his heart stirring with respect, like a seed taking root in cracked earth. He carved a wooden bird from mesquite, leaving it on her cot. When she woke, her fingers traced its wings, and a faint smile like a crack of light through a boarded window crossed her face. Her hatred, once a wildfire, began to smolder, tempered by his care. Josiah, haunted by his failure, found purpose in her survival, each act of kindness a step toward redemption. Their silence softened, warm like the hearth's glow, weaving a fragile trust, like wildflowers pushing through the desert's scars. The New Mexico dawn broke over the horizon, jagged and red, like a wound torn open, casting long shadows across the dry creek bed where Josiah's cabin stood, a weathered sentinel against the vast, unforgiving desert. 5 miles from Redemption's skeletal remains, the air hung heavy with the scent of dust and mesquite, the wind whispering secrets through the cottonwoods, their leaves rustling like the ghosts of forgotten promises. Josiah stood on the porch, his broad frame silhouetted against the rising sun, his gray eyes scanning the distant ridges, where buzzards circled like omens. His hands, rough as the bark of the ancient oak by the creek, gripped a tin mug of coffee, its bitter steam curling like a prayer he no longer believed in. Serafina, now stronger after 10 days of healing, moved inside, her bare feet silent on the creaking floorboards, her smallpox scars fading to soft echoes on her sun-darkened skin. Her dark hair, once matted with blood, hung loose, swaying like a raven's wing as she folded the patched blanket on her cot. The cabin, once a tomb for Josiah's grief, hummed with a quiet rhythm, the clink of a spoon, the crackle of the fire, the faint cluck of chickens outside. Yet an undercurrent of unease stirred, like a storm brewing beneath the desert's calm. Josiah's heart, heavy with the weight of Lila's loss, now carried a new burden, the knowledge of Sheriff Thorne's treachery. Serafina's words about the smallpox blankets, delivered in her halting English, had ignited a fire in him, not just anger, but a fierce resolve, like a blade honed sharp after years of rust. He'd heard rumors in Redemption's saloon, tales of Thorne's greed, how he'd swindled Cherokee land for gold in '38, leaving bodies in his wake. Now, word had reached the town that Serafina lived, a living testament to his crimes, and Josiah knew Thorne wouldn't let that stand. His jaw clenched, knuckles white as bone, as he pictured the sheriff's pockmarked face, his cold eyes glinting like a rattler's. Serafina, too, felt the storm coming, her dark eyes sharp as she glanced out the window, her hands pausing over a basket of dried corn, her body taut like a bowstring drawn tight. Her hatred for Thorne, once a wildfire that consumed her, had softened in Josiah's care, but it smoldered still, a coal ready to flare at the slightest spark. "You feel it, don't you?" Josiah asked, his voice low, carrying the slow drawl of the Southwest, as he stepped inside, his boots thudding on the floor. Serafina turned, her gaze meeting his, her high cheekbones catching the firelight, her lips pressed tight. "They're coming," she said, her voice steady but laced with a tremor, like a river running over hidden rocks. "Thorne won't let me breathe." Josiah nodded, setting the mug down with a clink, his broad shoulders squaring like a man bracing for a fight. "He'll have to go through me first," he said, his words heavy, like stones dropped into a still pond. Serafina's eyes flickered, not with fear but with something new, trust, fragile as a desert bloom, taking root in her heart. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the wooden bird he'd carved, its wings smooth under her touch, a silent vow between them. By midday, the horizon darkened, not with clouds but with dust kicked up by Hoover-6 riders, led by Thorne, their silhouettes sharp against the blazing sun. The sheriff, a hulking figure in a black duster, his badge glinting like a false promise, reined his horse at the edge of the ranch, his men fanning out like wolves circling prey. His voice boomed, thick with malice. "Josiah, you harboring a witch? That smallpox girl's a curse, a fugitive. Hand her over." Josiah stood on the porch, his rifle resting easy in his hands, his face carved like the desert itself, hard, unyielding. "She's no witch," he shouted, his voice steady as granite. "She's a girl you tried to kill. This is her home now." Serafina, hidden behind the door, her heart pounding like a war drum, gripped a kitchen knife, her knuckles pale, her eyes blazing with a fire that had once been hate but now burned with purpose. Thorne laughed, a sound like gravel under boots, and dismounted, his men drawing rifles, their faces shadowed by wide-brimmed hats. "You're a fool, Josiah," he sneered, stepping closer, his boots crunching on the dry earth. "She's poison. You'll die for this." Josiah's eyes narrowed, gray as a storm's heart, and he cocked the rifle, the click echoing like a warning. "You're the poison thorn," he said, voice low, each word a blade. "You sold her people for gold, killed 'em with blankets. You don't get to judge her." Serafina's breath caught, her chest tightening not from fear, but from the weight of Josiah's words, his defense a shield around her heart. She stepped forward, knife in hand, her silhouette fierce against the firelight. "I ain't your curse," she said, her voice rising, sharp as a hawk's cry. "You took my family, my land. You're the death here." The air crackled, tense as a drawn bowstring, as Thorne's men advanced, their rifles gleaming in the noon sun. Serafina, her hatred now a honed blade, moved with the grace of her Cherokee ancestors, slipping out the back door to the corral. She whispered to the horses, her voice soft but urgent, like a prayer to the spirits, and cut their tethers. The animals bolted, hooves thundering, kicking up a cloud of dust that choked the air like a desert storm. Josiah seized the chaos, firing a shot into the sky, the crack scattering Thorne's men like startled crows. Serafina, her dark hair whipping in the wind, darted to the barn, grabbing a pitchfork and a bucket of dry chaff. She tossed it into the wind, the dust swirling thicker, blinding the riders, their shouts muffled in the haze. Josiah, his heart racing like a runaway stallion, led Serafina to a narrow path by the creek bed, where a rocky outcrop loomed, its shadow jagged like a broken promise. He'd scouted this land for years, knew its secrets, the fault line in the stone, weakened by years of drought. "Push here," he whispered, his voice urgent, his hand guiding hers to a loose boulder. Together, they heaved, muscles straining, sweat beading on their brows, until the rock gave way, tumbling down with a roar, triggering a cascade of stones that blocked the path. Thorne's men shouted, their horses rearing, but the sheriff, his face twisted with rage, charged forward, rifle raised. Serafina, her eyes wild as a desert fire, grabbed a fallen branch, swinging it with the strength of her ancestors, catching Thorne's arm. He stumbled, and in that moment, a panicked horse, spooked by the dust, reared and struck him, sending him sprawling into the dry creek bed, where a jagged rock met his skull with a sickening crack. The dust settled, the riders fleeing into the dusk, their torches fading like dying stars. Josiah and Serafina stood, breathless, their hands bloodied but steady, their eyes meeting in the fading light. Her hatred, once a wildfire, had burned into something else, justice, fierce and clear, like a river carving through stone. Josiah's guilt, a weight he'd carried since Lila's death, lifted slightly, his resolve a beacon in the dark. "You did it," he said, voice soft, like the wind after a storm. Serafina nodded, her face softening, a faint smile breaking through, like dawn on a scarred land. "We did it," she whispered, her hand brushing his, a fragile bond forged in fire, ready to bloom like wildflowers in a desert spring. "It's nothin'," he said, his southwest drawl warm, like a campfire's crackle. "You're hurt worse." He nodded at her bruised hands, knuckles raw as storm-scoured earth. She shook her head, a faint smile breaking through, like dawn cracking a dark sky. "We're alive," she said, her voice trembling with quiet strength. "And that's more than Thorne wanted." Josiah's jaw tightened, gray eyes softening, like clouds parting for blue. He pressed a damp cloth to her hand, fingers steady despite his ache. "Let me," he said, voice a whisper, like wind through cottonwoods. Serafina flinched, body taut as a bowstring, but her eyes held his, searching, finding no deceit. She paused, then looked straight into his eyes, her gaze piercing, like a hawk's cry cutting the silence. "If your wife and daughter hadn't died of smallpox," she asked, her voice low, sharp with the weight of 2,200 miles of loss, "would you be like them?" The question hung heavy, like a storm cloud ready to break, her eyes searching his soul, probing for truth beneath his weathered exterior. Josiah's breath caught, his hand stilling, the cloth dripping water like unshed tears. He met her gaze, his gray eyes steady, raw with a grief that mirrored hers. "I don't know," he said, voice soft but honest, like the creak of a cradle in the dark. "Maybe once I could have been angry, blind, like them. But losin' Lila, losin' my Mary, it broke something in me, made me see what hate does. You're showin' me there's more than that." His words, rough as sandstone, carried a quiet vow, like a seed planted in cracked earth. Serafina's eyes softened, like ice thawing on a spring creek, her hatred smoldering into something new trust, fragile as a desert bloom. She reached out, her hand resting on his, her fingers cool against his warmth, a gesture small but seismic, like a seed splitting open in barren soil. "My people," she said, her English halting but fierce, "taught me to carry pain, not let it own me. You're teaching me to live again." Her voice trembled, not with hatred but with hope, like a flower pushing through scorched ground. Josiah's throat tightened, eyes stinging with a feeling buried since Lila's cradle stilled. He nodded, speechless, his gray eyes locked with Serafina's, their depths a quiet storm where pain and hope churned like a desert sky before rain. The New Mexico dusk wrapped them in its indigo embrace, the lavender hill glowing faintly under the starlight, its sweet scent weaving through the air like a whispered vow. Serafina stood close, her braid loose, strands of dark hair dancing in the gentle wind, catching the moonlight like threads of obsidian. Her eyes, deep as a midnight creek, held a fire fierce yet tender, a flame that had burned through the ashes of the trail of tears, now alight with something new, something alive. Her smile, small but radiant, broke across her face like dawn splitting a dark horizon, softening the smallpox scars into mere echoes of her survival. She stepped closer, her breath warm, mingling with his, her high cheekbones flushed with the heat of the moment, her lips parted slightly, full and soft, a promise unspoken. Josiah's heart pounded like a war drum, his broad shoulders tensing, his hands, rough as mesquite bark, hovering uncertainly, as if afraid to touch a dream too fragile to hold. But Serafina's gaze, unwavering, drew him in, her eyes searching his, finding the man beneath the grief, the one who'd cut her down from that cursed door, who'd planted lavender where only scars had grown. "Josiah," she whispered, her voice low, laced with Cherokee cadence, each syllable a pebble in a still pond. "You gave me a home." Her words, heavy as the earth they'd tilled, broke something in him, like a dam giving way to a flood. He reached out, his calloused fingers brushing her cheek, tracing the curve of her jaw, her skin warm and smooth, alive under his touch. She leaned into his hand, her eyes fluttering shut for a moment, lashes dark against her skin, a sigh escaping her lips like a desert breeze. Then, as if pulled by a force older than the stars above, she tilted her face upward, and Josiah, his breath catching, leaned down. Their lips met, a kiss fierce and molding, like a fire catching dry tinder, its heat searing away the pain of years, Lila's fevered cries, the trail's endless sorrow, Thorn's betrayal. Her lips were soft, yielding yet hungry, tasting of lavender and salt, her breath a rhythm that matched his own, urgent, alive. His hand slid to her waist, pulling her close, her body pressing against his, warm and strong, like the oak by the creek, unyielding yet alive with new growth. Strands of her hair tangled in his fingers, soft as raven feathers, and she deepened the kiss, her hands gripping his shirt, knuckles brushing the locket that held Lila's memory, now joined by this new love. The world fell away, the dry creek, the cabin, the scars of their pasts, leaving only the fire of their embrace, a blaze that burned away hatred, guilt, and loss, leaving only the promise of tomorrow. When they parted, breathless, her smile was a sunrise, his eyes a calm sea, their foreheads resting together, a silent vow sealed in the desert's heart, where lavender bloomed and love, like a river, carved a new path through stone. The next morning, by the dry creek bed, its parched veins a mirror to their pasts, Josiah pointed to a rocky hill kissed by the sun. "We ain't runnin'," he said, voice firm, like the oak by the creek. "This land's ours. Let's make it live." Serafina nodded, eyes bright as a hawk spotting dawn. They planted lavender, seeds stubborn as their will, carried from a Santa Fe trader's pouch. They worked, hands digging into earth, sweat mixing with dust, each seed defying the desert's cruelty. Serafina hummed a Cherokee song, its notes weaving through the wind, coaxing the creek's dry veins to whisper life. By dusk, the hill was dotted with mounds, each a promise. Serafina stood, hands caked with earth, face glowing with pride, like a warrior after battle. Josiah watched, heart swelling, not with guilt but purpose, like a river finding its course. "This is home," she said, smile like light through a boarded window. Josiah nodded, hand brushing hers, their fingers lingering, a silent oath. "For both of us," he said, drawl soft, like wind after a storm. The lavender would bloom, a purple sea to drown past scars, a testament to their trust, their unspoken love, like wildflowers reclaiming a broken land. The New Mexico dawn unfurled over the ranch, a soft blush of gold spilling across the lavender-covered hill, its purple blooms swaying like a sea of whispered promises 5 miles west of Redemption's crumbling bones, where the dry creek bed now trickled with life, its waters murmuring secrets of renewal. The air carried the sweet, healing scent of lavender, mingling with the sharp tang of mesquite and the faint musk of earth after rain, a rare gift in this desert scarred by sorrow. Josiah stood by the corral, his broad frame softened by the morning light, his gray eyes, once stormy, now calm as a still pond, tracing the hill where he and Serafina had planted their defiance. His hands, calloused as the oak by the creek, rested on a new fence post, carved with a simple flower, a quiet tribute to their survival. Serafina stepped from the cabin, her dark hair braided loosely, catching the sun like polished obsidian, her smallpox scars mere whispers on her skin, her steps light yet sure, like a deer crossing a meadow. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, held a warmth that had grown in the weeks since Thorn's fall, her smile a crack of light through a once boarded heart. Their wounds had healed. Josiah's arm now bore a faint scar, a badge of their stand. Serafina's hands, once bruised, moved with grace, weaving baskets from willow reeds, her fingers nimble as a weaver's shuttle. The cabin, once a tomb for Josiah's grief, hummed with life-laughter of newcomers, the clatter of tin plates, the soft lowing of cattle beyond the fence. Their bond, forged in battle, had deepened, not in grand gestures but in quiet moments, shared glances over morning coffee, her hand brushing his as they worked the fields, their silence a warm hearth where trust bloomed like lavender in barren soil. Josiah's heart, once heavy with Lila's loss, now carried a new rhythm, a song of purpose, sung in Serafina's presence. Her hatred, once a wildfire fed by the trail of tea, 2,200 rupees, miles of blood and betrayal had softened into a steady ember, not of vengeance, but of resilience, like a river carving a new path through stone. One morning, as the sun climbed, Serafina knelt by the lavender, her hands cradling a small, perfect bloom, its scent rising like a prayer. Josiah watched, his boots planted in the earth, his face lined with years but softened by a smile, faint yet real, like dawn breaking over a scarred land. "You've made this place live," he said, his southwest drawl warm, like the crackle of a campfire. "Never thought I'd see beauty here again." Serafina stood, her braids swaying, her eyes gleaming like stars reflected in a creek. "It's not just me," she said, her voice steady, laced with the cadence of her Cherokee tongue, each word a pebble in a still pond. "You gave me a home when I had none. We built this together." Her words hung heavy, like a vow sealed in the desert's heart, and Josiah's throat tightened, his eyes stinging with a warmth he hadn't felt since Lila's laughter filled the cabin. The ranch had become an oasis, drawing wanderers, Cherokee survivors, orphaned settlers, men and women cast out by Redemption's cruel whispers. They came, drawn by the lavender's scent, their faces weary but hopeful, like pilgrims seeking a promised land. Serafina greeted them, her presence steady as the oak, her voice firm yet kind, teaching them to plant, to weave, to heal. Josiah, once a solitary figure, worked beside them, his hands guiding posts into the earth, his laughter a sound he'd forgotten ringing like a bell across the fields. One evening, under a sky blazing with stars, a young Cherokee woman, her eyes hollow from the trail, offered Serafina a beaded bracelet, its colors vibrant as the hills bloom. "You've given us a place to belong," she said, voice trembling, like a stream finding its course. Serafina's smile, bright as moonlight, answered, "This is your home too." Months later, a new life stirred a child, born under the lavender's watchful gaze. They named her Amaris, meaning child of the moon, her eyes bright as the stars that had witnessed their survival, her chubby hands grasping at the air like a promise of tomorrow. Serafina cradled her, her face glowing with a fierce, tender love, like a warrior guarding a flame. Josiah, his gray hair flecked with dust, knelt beside them, his rough fingers brushing Amaris's cheek, his heart swelling, not with guilt but with a joy as vast as the desert sky. "She's ours," he whispered, his voice soft, like the wind after a storm, "our light in the dark." Serafina nodded, her eyes meeting his, their bond a river flowing through years of pain, its current strong, unyielding, like the creek now alive with water. The ranch grew, its fields expanding, the lavender spreading like a purple tide, drowning the scars of the past. Children ran through the blooms, their laughter a melody that drowned out the wind's old sorrows. Serafina taught them Cherokee songs, her voice rising like smoke, weaving stories of her people's strength, while Josiah shared tales of the desert, his drawl a steady anchor. One night, as they sat on the porch, the oak's branches swaying like a preacher's hands, Amaris asleep in Serafina's arms, Josiah carved a new figure, a tiny lavender sprig into the fence post. "For her," he said, his voice thick, like earth after rain. Serafina's hand found his, her touch warm, a silent vow. "For all of us," she said, her smile a crack of light through a once broken heart. Years passed, and the ranch became a legend, whispered in Redemption Saloon, carried by traders to Santa Fe. The lavender hill, once barren, now bloomed eternal, its scent a beacon for the lost, a testament to two souls who'd turned pain into promise. Josiah, his hair now silver, sat beside Serafina, her braids streaked with gray, their hands entwined, their eyes tracing Amaris as she danced among the flowers, her laughter a song of renewal. They were no longer just survivors but builders of a legacy, their love a fire that warmed the weary, like a hearth in a winter storm. The creek sang softly, its waters reflecting the stars, a mirror to their journey from hatred to trust, from loss to love, like wildflowers claiming a scorched land.